Welcome to the presentation on quality discussion responses in the online classroom. You will agree that the discussion forum may very well be the center of successful online teaching. For the next 50 minutes, we will together explore the key elements of the online discussion forum. Together, we will explore the important ingredients of the good discussion forum. Let us together see how we can transform our discussion forum into magical experiences for students. The online classroom forum may very well be at the center of the successful learning experience of the online student. The discussion forum replaces the communication in the face-to-face classroom and can easily be like the glue that holds the entire classroom experience together. As such, the online discussion forum should be engaging and interactive. So how can we make the online classroom interactive while ensuring that students' responses demonstrate that they have grasped the content and gained from the subject being discussed? This will require that we as instructors involve our students in meaningful discussion while ensuring the discussion forum is interactive. According to the University of Oregon Teaching Effectiveness Program, online educators who use discussion boards successfully estimate that their interaction with students can be as much as 3 times the interaction with face-to-face students, and that peer interaction is even many times more than that. Based on this research, what are your thoughts about how we as instructors can make the most of our interaction with our students in the online discussion? How can we capture and maintain our students' attention while ensuring they hone the learning concepts? What is your personal perspective on effective engagement strategies in the discussion forum? Maybe one of the key ingredients of successful classroom discussion is when students feel comfortable within the classroom facilitation and their colleagues. It is important for students to get to know each other. The good facilitator ensures that students have the opportunity to introduce themselves to each other. Students participate more in the online classroom when they feel comfortable with each other. Facilitators will want to ensure that their interaction makes students feel comfortable enough to interact with them and their peers in the classroom. When students have a sense of comfort and freedom, they share more, which allows them to build on their own discussion responses. A good way to achieve this is for the facilitator to set the pace by being warm and inviting, referring to students by their names when responding to their discussion posts. Refer to some interesting facts they mentioned in their discussion response. This shows the student that we actually read their responses and are interested in what they wrote. When we post supplemental resources in the discussion forum, tell the students why the resource is important to the particular learning concept. These are only a few of the ideas that will help our students to feel comfortable in the online discussion and increase the participation level. Do you agree that students participate more in a discussion when they are comfortable? Is this not the case even in the face-to-face conversation and classroom discussion? It is normal for students to try to identify themselves with each other in the class. You can set the model you expect students to follow. Our contributions should therefore be substantive, warm, and well written. We should take the time to model all we expect the student to do in the discussion forum. Let us remember that we are more likely to participate in a warm, welcoming environment. We must do all we can to facilitate that warmth in the classroom discussion. Encourage students to form these warm relationships with each other, which will foster a satisfying and engaging conversation among them. Did I hear someone say that it is important to plan how the discussion forum in the classroom is done? Yes. Planning may be the one most important element of the engaging classroom discussion. The classroom facilitator must plan each discussion forum in great detail. The quality of the discussion in your classroom starts with the extent to which you have planned. You must carefully plan the content you want students to include in each discussion forum. So where does one get the information? The learning objectives for the course is where you start. Your discussion questions should be crafted as to lead students to investigate and research this content information. The discussion forum is where they will respond to content at some level of Bloom's taxonomy hierarchy. Simple recall is not adequate. Students should be encouraged to employ critical thinking skills when responding to discussion questions. One of the primary issues faculty experience in the online discussion forum is knowing how you want students to respond. Do you want them to repeat facts? Do you want them to express opinions? Do you want them to give a critical analysis, or is the discussion forum just a time to give you a break from the rigor of grading and well-planned assessment for the instructor? The instructions for the questions must be clear, specific, and instructive. When engaging in discussion in the online classroom, think about these 3 questions. Do you want to create learners that are convergent thinkers? That is, students that recite the correct answers? Or do you want to create learners that are divergent thinkers? Students able to demonstrate creativity in their responses? Or do you want to create evaluative thinkers, students who are able to justify and/or defend their answers? We will all agree that the discussion question must be well worded and structured. The way the question is worded provides the contextual setting for the student's response. The wording of the question is like a cue to where the discussion should go. The wording of the question can determine if the students simply recall facts or whether they add critical analysis to the discussion question. The facilitator guides this process both by the wording of the discussion question and the way each contribution is worded. If you want to create questions that promote convergent thinkers, your questions will typically begin with why or how. When creating divergent questions, you will want to frame your questions in a way that students will think about outcome or consequences associated with the facts provided in the question. This is where you may pose questions that includes a scenario, which makes the discussion more interesting and will get students to take a more creative approach to responding to the question. The evaluative question will most often work best when students are debating or participating in group discussions. This type of question will foster a more collaborative approach to learning. Another key element of the instructions to students center around the grading process. Each discussion question should have a well-crafted grading rubric which tells the students how the discussion will be graded. The rubric should award points for every element of the response. Students need to know if what portion of the grade distribution goes to the initial response and to the responses to their peers. They must be given examples and instructions on what constitutes a substantive discussion response. Students should be told whether it is necessary to include references in the sources they have used in developing their responses. They should also be told if there is a word limit. They should also know the time portion in which they should post. Do they have a week to make all posts? Most of the initial responses should be posted on a particular day of the week. When should responses to peers be posted? The instructor must be a good facilitator. What constitutes good facilitating? Take a moment and look at the list and list 2 characteristics of good discussion forum facilitating. What did you come up with? I came up with a few interesting features. Let us see if yours look like mine. Have you ever sat in a discussion and the leader uses up most of the time? I recall sitting in classrooms where the facilitator starts by saying, "I expect full participation," and then the next time anyone is given the opportunity to speak is when he says, "We are done for today," and any questions about next time. Remember that the instructor is no more than a facilitator. Our role is never to post the most responses or comments on every idea. We can keep the discussion going, but the student must be encouraged to take the lead. Facilitate, facilitate. Encourage and support. All your responses in the discussion forum should model best practices. A best practice is to post substantive responses. Your response to each student should point out what was good about their ideas. You should then offer an opinion on the response. Next, you will want to make a comment on what the literature says about the idea. When there is a need to guide the student, this should be done in an encouraging way, or better yet, by asking if the student has a different opinion on the subject. Any unique situations where there is need for special direction should be done individually and not in the open forum. Most importantly, each student must get precise information on how they may improve on the discussion responses. I love to ask follow-up questions. I find that this requires students to think and give more in-depth responses. I find that follow-up questions help students to explore different angles they may not have thought of. Follow-up questions also encourage more critical thinking. The opinion of every student must be valued. Can you recall the last time someone made you feel as though your idea was just plain stupid? This happens often, but should not happen in our responses or lack thereof to our valued students. No matter how far out the idea may seem, it is worth some consideration. We can devalue a student's opinion in more than one way. Can you imagine an entire semester passing and you have never commented on not even one of John's responses? This is just as bad as, or maybe even worse, than giving John a public scolding in his obviously inadequate response to the question. Our next point suggests that our response in the classroom forum should be supportive. We should grasp every attempt to support the student by giving advice, adding ideas, or just simply supporting their contribution to the discussion. Just a word of support from us can enhance the way the student feel about the importance in the classroom. We should also be careful to limit our involvement in the discussion forum to those key ties when the student needs our assistance. The requirements may change from institution to institution, but a good practice is to say that just enough to keep the discussion going. The good facilitator will not want to take over the discussion forum. Neither is he required to provide the students with the answer to the discussion question. If that were the case, the question would not be needed in the first place. The facilitator's role is just that, an encouraging facilitator of the ongoing discussion in the classroom. One of the most important roles the facilitator can play is to be the encourager-in-chief, especially for the weak and slower students. Have you ever been in a class and was shy to raise your hand? Many students are in this position at one time or another. Thorough, skillful guidance and well-planned encouragement, the shyest or weakest student can become a winner in the discussion forum. Use kind and supportive words. Provide private guidance and modeling for these students. Give them sample responses they can model. Show them how they can improve on what they submitted. When they improve, reward them publicly for the great quality work. This is also an opportunity where you will post additional responses and ideas to the general class. You know that these students can benefit from. You can become their champion. We must grasp every opportunity to keep the discussion on track. Sometimes this is a challenge if you have negative leaders in the class. It is our role to get in there and reframe the questions so that you can get students to get back on track with the key content information. Keep control over the discussion as the facilitator. Guide students away from the usual tangents. Where needed, remind the class of the question and get them back on track with appropriate responses. Here are some important pointers we can all benefit from. At the end of this slide, we can pause to list our own pointers, and you can then share your ideas with your colleagues. Ask open-ended questions which can elicit thoughtful responses. Students should be forced to carefully research and critically analyze information they plan to add to the discussion question. Our questions can help to move them away from the short, unreasoned response. Allow students to see the responses of other students only after they have posted their own response. This strategy forces students to post their original ideas. They are unable to borrow from other students if they are unable to see other responses before they post their own. Ask questions which support critical thinking. Encourage critical thinking and use of analytical skills. Everyone feels more rewarded after when they know that they have to put some thought into their response. They feel especially proud when their response elicits comments from their colleagues. Help them to get these important accolades. Encourage students to support their opinions with examples and supporting evidence. An important aspect of the learning process is research. Students should be encouraged to support their opinions with ideas from research. Help them to see that their ideas may be supported by other authors and researchers. They will find and feel especially proud of their discovery. The best way to get this done is to model for the students. Use varying methods and resources in the discussion forums to accommodate all learning styles. The best discussion questions use a variety of forums to accommodate the various learning styles of all the learning styles. Have you ever thought of using a video to generate your discussion question? What about creating a Voki scenario that can generate the discussion topic? You may also want to build a storyline students can use as a starting point for their discussion. Get creative. Students will enjoy the fun. Encourage students to include various emoticons and other resources in their discussion responses to add energy and validity to their responses. This idea speaks for itself. Emoticons are fun and expressive. Maybe students can also create their own videos. The sky is really the limit on this. Encourage the adventure as the class shares the experience of an energetic discussion together. Here is a statement from the University of Waterloo. Because students know that you and their peers will read their postings, they often put significant thought and effort into them. Asynchronous discussion gives students time to consider their postings before making them. The exchange of ideas also often results in higher quality work than if students were left on their own, and the exchange can be across sections, not just within one tutorial group or small discussion group. What do you think? Do you agree with this source? Take a few minutes to list a few reasons why you agree or disagree. How will you apply this concept to all we have discussed so far? You may also want to take a look at the original source to see the context of this idea. What ideas can we share about the various formats the online classroom discussion forum can use? Do we always have to stick to the generic question and answer format? Not at all. Here are some ideas I have used before, which I have also seen in other classroom faculty that faculty are using effectively. Review each example for its merit in your classroom. Also consider that each sample may not be applicable for every situation. I have found that small group discussions work very well. Social science teachers have used the small group to introduce difficult concepts and challenging topics using the group discussion method. In these cases, they may select or have class members select subtopics from a larger topic and have the class divide into groups for the discussion. Take a topic like the impact of poverty on the urban society. There are many angles to this topic which may not be best covered in one general discussion group. Factors like the level of interest, the impact of the issue on individual societies, or similar factors may mean that students may take different paths of interest. This is a good situation where the smaller discussion group may work well. A colleague of mine likes to use debates in the discussion forum. The debate simulates a healthy competitive spirit and energizes the class for discussion. You will find that the debate encourages students to use critical thinking skills, which they may not have used otherwise. The debate also brings the shy student out of the woodwork right into the forefront, especially when they see that the team is dependent on them. The one thing you may want to control is the team staying on the topic in the next week after the class has moved on. I also find that peer review process works well in the discussion forum. Each individual is given the opportunity to review a piece of work presented by a colleague and share their perspectives in the discussion forum. This works particularly well in the live discussion forum. One last technique that I use effectively in the past is role play. You may think that role play should be reserved for the live classroom, but not so. Role play works just as effectively in the online setting. Wherever possible, you should make this fun and a crazy activity. The funnier, the better, once the content is not lost in the fun. Just like you see in the standard classroom, there are some issues you need to look out for. Do you remember the classroom bully who wanted to take over the entire discussion? If you let that happen, you can be sure that you will never be able to cover the entire topic. You may also find that some students may fall out of the discussion. You must set up the environment which supports each member of the class. As much as some may think otherwise, the classroom belongs equally to all students. You must use every strategy at your disposal to foster an environment where each student shares equally in all elements of the classroom activity. You will want to set the highest standards in the discussion forum. Most classroom experts strongly suggest that classroom etiquette should be observed at all times. If we go back to the classroom bully discussion, there are times when bullying may show up in as simple a way as the use of bold and color fonts. Look out for those. At the very outset, you will want to include guidelines on etiquette in your first contract with the class. Students need to see from your example and close monitoring that each idea shared in the classroom is equally important and valued. A breakdown in the classroom etiquette has the effect of distracting from the content. We cannot let this happen. The online classroom discussion is a great way to build community in your class. The discussion board is just not a place for learning, but it can be used as a place to build community in your class. In fact, it is safe to say that strong communities are learning communities. When your first discussion is a way for students to introduce themselves, you are off to a good start. You now have a foundation to build on. When students share as suggested, in some of the examples listed previously, they start to establish the kinds of relationships which foster learning. As we see in our various social settings, a weak community is the first step towards failure and tension in the learning system. One way to build this community of learners we have identified is to encourage some informal conversation in the discussion space. When students feel comfortable, they will learn better. There are times when even the formal intended content can be discussed in less formal settings. While you pay attention to balancing between the formal learning content with the less formal conversation, you will also want to balance between giving just enough content and allowing more flexibility in the discussion forum. All of this is simply saying that you must make the discussion forum a place of fun-filled learning. Try it and see how it works for you. Encourage students to post questions to the discussion forum rather than their personal emails. I have found that many times students send email questions about important content, course content, process, and new course content. Many questions asked by students can be answered in the general discussion forum rather than in personal emails. When the question is asked in the general discussion forum, it gives the instructor an opportunity to share ideas which may benefit students other than those who ask the question. The general forum is also a good place to introduce new content which may be brought out when responding to students' questions. Encourage students to keep only those personal questions for the email. Encourage them to post to the general forum. The good classroom facilitator will explore the best practices for classroom discussion. Here are a few best practices every online instructor should know about the classroom discussion forum. You should provide the class with the best resources. Wherever possible, you should give students easy access to the resources you have provided. It is good to include hyperlinks to the information where possible. You can give the students a sample of how to format the responses in the discussion forum. This helps. Another good practice is to give clear instructions on naming conventions to be followed in the discussion forum. I learned this great discussion strategy in a graduate class I did a while ago. The professor gave precise naming conventions for each discussion response. This helped to keep the key concepts in focus. What can we take away from this presentation? How will you apply the concepts we discussed? Given that all these ideas may not be possible to implement in one session, what long-term strategies will you implement to improve the quality of your online discussion forums? Will you be willing to chart the changes in your class as you implement some of these suggestions? Good luck, as you chart an even more interesting and fun-filled experience for you and your students in the online discussion forum. On this slide, you will find the lists of references that were used for this presentation. Thank you for listening.